Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Safest Family on the Block, where knowledge is power. I'm your host, Jason, and joining me today is Mish Handwerker. Mish, hello. Thank you for joining us.
Oh, thank you for having me on.
It's a real pleasure and an honor to have you on board. Mish and I know each other because we're both part of the greater Portland area martial arts community. But beyond that, Mish, could you start by just telling folks a little bit about your martial arts and safety journey, what you're doing now?
Well, I started my training back in late 1990. My parents would not let me do martial arts growing up because I was going to get air quoted hurt. But then again, I also couldn't do football either. However, I could do soccer. And we all know how, as knowledge is power, time goes on, soccer, more concussions than football. But parents didn't want me to get hurt. So when I turned 18 and I had my own money, I started training, and I started in Taekwondo like most people. But then I found Ruku Kempo and modern Arnis and small circle jiu-jitsu. And I just kind of went from there. And my Arnis journey took me into meeting Bram Frank, who is, he teaches a knife system called modular. And so that, I like the stick, but I like the blade a little bit more. So I kind of took that on, and I'm actually kind of honored that a couple of years ago, he announced me as his official successor when he decides to retire. But yeah, so I've karate and karate, Arnis, and knife have really kind of been my focus for like the last, say, 20 years. And strictly. And let's see, last January, I opened up a storefront school because I'd been teaching out of my garage forever. But, when you're told, oh, hey, by the way, at the end of the year, you're not going to have a job, you got to try and be like, okay. So, I knew my future was going to, my future retirement was going to be owning a martial arts school and serving my community that way. But I didn't realize it was going to be so quick. So yeah, that's what I do. I sit at home and I do, I try and run a business. I also, because my Kempo is a lot of pressure point based, I have a show that I've had on for, I don't know, I think 2015, called Q-Show Corner on YouTube, where I, short little videos. Well, sometimes they're long, but a 5-minute video showing you a point, how it works, and then offering you to just take it back to your dojo, play, and have fun. So if it doesn't work for you, it doesn't work for you, and if it does, great, put it in your toolbox. So,
and if I remember correctly, the career that you recently transitioned from was in healthcare security.
Yeah,
so you had a lot of opportunity to practice some of the defense skills, a lot of the de-escalation skills, a lot of the awareness skills.
Yeah, I did. I was in the security industry for almost 20 years. I was a bouncer. I did maritime security, drove around in a patrol car in the middle of the night, stood around watching dirt. But yeah, the last 14 years I had spent in the hospital system as a security officer, dealing with, the violence that, and it's, when you think about a hospital environment, you don't think about the violence that potentially is there, but there's a lot more violence than people would think. So,
yeah, like I haven't worked in that industry, although I've trained a few teams that work in hospital security, so I have a general sense of what's going on there. And to me, it's a lot like bouncing. In bouncing, people are under the influence of alcohol. In the hospital, they're under the influence of grief, of anger, of confusion.
And sometimes meth.
Yeah, and a lot of people go there for that. So, it is a much sketchier environment than a lot of people assume.
Right.
Yeah. And one where, unlike in bouncing, there isn't a culture where hands-on is, in bad bouncing teams, hands-on is actually kind of celebrated. But
Right.
even in good ones, it's tolerated a little more. Where in the hospitals, because it's a much more litigious environment, you're much more encouraged to use your de-escalation skills and your wit, charm, and personality.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
And when I was bouncing, I started and that's kind of where I started my original training company for training security and all that was, um, I had worked with bouncers where it's like, oh yeah, we got to beat that guy up. Oh, it was so fun.
Yeah.
And I'm like, okay, yes. Yeah, it was an adrenaline rush. And I'll admit I got into karate versus judo or other arts because I like to hit people. I don't really want to roll around on the ground with people. But no, like beating somebody up is not actually fun. Like
No.
it's a violent situation. And there are people out there that are just that's what they're in there for. Some of the best fights I've been in have been where I haven't had to swing or defend myself physically. It was by using words.
Yeah.
So
That's kind of what I wanted to bring you on today to talk about
yeah,
for the benefit of our viewers. About you and I have both been martial artists for our entire life. We hang out with martial artists, long-term martial artists, and most people get into martial arts get in either for just because it's a really entertaining group fitness class, or because they want to become badass ninjas.
yeah,
Right. That's pretty much the two reasons. But as we grow in the martial arts, the self-defense and safety aspects from it aren't the kicking and the punching and the stabbing.
right.
Like I was mentioning before the show, that folks who've watched the show know that I'm really passionate about falling skills, about the break falls taught in the martial arts, which, because I haven't been in a fight that I wasn't being paid for this millennium, but I fell down yesterday. I'm right now I'm training for a marathon because my college roommate bullied me into it.
Okay.
And so I'm about halfway through a 7-mile pace run, and my toe finds a seam in the sidewalk. And I'm running at a 10-minute mile pace, and I am flying through the air on
Okay.
concrete with spaghetti legs. And my body just tucked and rolled into the classic forward Ikemi break roll that you do thousands of times if you do judo, jujitsu, aikido. And I came up, I've got a little bit of road rash on my knee,
Okay.
but that is in a fall that could have seriously hurt me if I hadn't had those skills.
Oh, absolutely.
I would have face planted. I would have scraped up. I would certainly be out of the running to train for this race.
Yeah.
And that's it. That is just the most recent of, I can think of a dozen incidents in my life where I avoided injury through that simple falling skill.
Yeah.
And I'm sure that you have tales of your own about break falls. Absolutely the most useful physical self-defense skill you'll learn in martial arts.
Yeah. And in fact, when I redesigned my curriculum for, opening up the school is in the first year, I cover basically all the basic falls. We start out with the rolling, and then we have the side fall, the back fall, the forward fall. But I think for me, the forward roll and the back fall have been the most helpful in real life situations.
Yeah, because again, if you're even a little bit smart and lucky, you get in a fight once every 20 years, but we all fall down once a year, whether we need to or not.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so that's one of the surprising safety and health and self-defense benefits that comes out of martial arts training. And I thought it would be good for our viewers for us to just kind of jaw about some of the other ones. Another one for me is just simply the cardio. If you look at the list of the causes of death for adults, getting regular cardio fixes half of them. Greatly reduces your incidents. And a good martial arts class will get you moving, get you breathing, get you a little bit of cardio.
Yeah, it's like for me, I don't do necessarily the traditional sparring that you would normally see like in a Taekwondo class or a sports martial arts class. But every single class, I have my students go through kata. And so, you know, they have to, no matter what level that they're at, they do all of them. So my rule is you have to do at least one of every one. And then when you get to the one that you're currently working on, you do at least 5 per class. But the more, and then of course, you know, if you've got say like in my teen and adult class, I've got a group that's a little bit higher and people who are just starting. So those people who are just doing Taikyoko Shodan, they're doing it like 15 times. And just that activity of a down strike punch, that can really get the heart moving. Especially when when I'm telling him to focus on speed moves or like striking, or just, you know, not just like going with the flow of the kata, but actually making it like an aerobic workout. So
and so that disguised repetition even makes the cardio less obvious. But again, it's a subtle thing. It is not the most exciting way to protect your life, to defend your life. Nobody's ever going to make a movie about it. Jason Statham will never star in a movie where he got good cardio and changed his diet so he won't have heart disease in his 70s. But it's real. What are some of the other, as in your journey, what are some of the other surprising aspects of safety that came out of your martial arts experience?
You know, it's funny because if you go back to the original Karate Kid movie with Ralph Macchio, and I can't remember if it was the first movie or the second movie, but basically he kind of comes to this point where it's like, oh, I'm learning karate so I don't have to fight.
Yeah.
And for me, you know, I was an angry kid growing up. I always wanted to do martial arts. I didn't really know why. It was just something that I was interested in and I wanted to do. But the longer I do it, the more calm of a person I am. And the least, I don't know how I would say this. I know I can, it's almost like having the knowledge. I know I can hurt somebody. I don't want to. So I will rely more on words than I will on my physical actions. But I will rely on physical actions if I actually have to. And so it's just knowing that, you know, as you know, the longer I train, the more calm and peaceful I have become. And I think that in itself is a great, you know, helpful thing for, you know, we talk about physical health, but just mental health.
Yeah.
Because we all go through different things, but being able to calm yourself in a stressful situation, because stress, you know, we could go down a list of all the different chemicals that stress pushes into your brain and your body that's not healthy. But if you learn how to calm yourself, that can definitely help. And I know that the martial arts for me has helped me. So like doing security, there's been situations where, you know, we've gotten bomb threats at the hospital. And you know, you get these people say, oh my God, oh, you know, you like even nurses and doctors, and they're freaking out. And you're just like, okay, so it's real. We have a system for this, you know. And I've been told that when it comes to those really stressful situations, that people are really surprised of how calm I can be and relaxed, and just be like, okay, we're just going to go through the motions. We're going to check all the boxes, and we're going to do this, we're going to do that, instead of completely freaking out.
Yeah.
You know, and like when I used to bounce, like there was this one time I remember, I was bouncing over, the club doesn't exist anymore, but it was over off of 13th and Powell on the east side, called the Blue Butterfly or something like that, or the Firefly.
Yeah, it's just a couple blocks down from the what was it? It used to be called the Bossa Nova,
something
right?
like that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it was this club, not, it was like a little cafe during the day, and on the weekends it turned into a club. So I had a contract with them to run the team there, and I actually preferred working there, so I worked there. But the promoters were hip hop promoters, and so we got a lot of that hip hop crowd and that gang crowd. And for us, we had a dress code. I was very, very strict. And there was this one time, this guy, I mean, he gets in my face. He's like 2 inches away, and he's just screaming and yelling and cursing me and just calling me all kind of racial slurs. And I'm white, he was black, but I'm just sitting there and I'm just staring at him like, okay, no, you're not coming in. I'm sorry you feel that way. Yeah, come back next week. And even my wife, who was working with me at the time, she's like, oh my God, I can't believe how I'm so proud of you.
Well, there's two pieces of that confidence that training breeds, I think. And that's true for kids or adults whenever you got into it. Yeah. On the one hand, with that kind of confrontation, I think that because of how much our culture glorifies violence, because of, I think, also just some species generic ways that our brains and bodies are wired, when somebody starts to threaten you like that, there's a part of you that says, but if I don't flare back up to them, I'm a coward.
Right.
I think that's the default way of thinking, especially for males in our society. But if you've trained long enough, that gets replaced by, I'm letting him off the hook, I'm merciful.
Right.
And on the other side of that, there is because if you know how to handle yourself in a situation, whether you're a kid with enough karate to not be afraid of the bullies, whether you're an adult who's walking through a sketchy neighborhood at an hour that is not very sensible, the predators, whether they're bullies or criminals or what have you, or domestic abusers, will see how you move through the world and decide to go bother somebody else.
Mm-hmm.
And that confidence that comes from training that you're talking about, I think, is one of those. I think it's hinted at a little bit in a lot of movies with the old master who nobody bothers and what have you. But it's another of those surprise benefits of the martial arts.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I've working at the hospital, I'd gone through de-escalation training, and even as an instructor, I had gone through other de-escalation programs that giving me certifications to teach. But I think it really does come down to that confidence of just like, it's okay. Like, I don't have to fight back unless, of course, I have to. Mm-hmm. Like, he was not being physically threatening. I mean, he was verbally threatening me in that he was going to use physical violence. He was calling me names, but it's one of those where it's just like, okay, it's like and going like in a situation like that, for me, it's like, okay, that's fine. You're using words. Touch me, I dare you, touch me.
Yeah.
But it's, and when we look at the legality of things, it's like, if he's just yelling, if he never touched me or anything like that, and he's verbally berating me, and I go off and just pop off and hit him or whatever. I mean, yes, in a security role, I could probably, spin the story of, yes, he verbally he verbally threatened that he was going to physically abuse me. He was larger than me. I was one person, there were multiple people. So we could all, we could spin the story where I would come out the good guy, but would it really need to go there? I've been hurt enough that I don't really want to get hurt.
Yeah.
I don't like, especially as I get older, I don't like to get hurt.
Yeah.
But, so it's like, okay, well, but even if I couldn't spin it, I'm the bad guy if I physically strike first. So and especially in nowadays in today's, and I don't know, the Firefly, that was open, shoot, that was like 20 years ago. So, but that was one of those where racial tensions weren't as bad, I think, as they are now, especially the way that they're portrayed in the media. So I don't know. It's just it's just a interesting situation. But I used that all the time at the hospital. You have some person who's coming down off of meth or someone who has a mental health issue, because if project response or police will bring them into the ER.
Yeah.
And sometimes we actually got people who were too violent for jail, so they would bring them to the hospital.
Mm-hmm.
But and where I worked, we had a special section where we actually had rooms that would lock so we could secure them. And there were times where, I had this one guy, he was going off the rail. He was standing on the bed and screaming and yelling and cursing at the nurse and the social worker. And they were right at the door. And he's like, oh, he says, I might be yelling at you, but I'm not going to hurt you, but I'm going to hurt him right there. And I'm standing right there at the door. I'm just like, okay.
Yeah.
And so, they finish their talk, they step out, and the guy's like, okay, buddy, come and get me. And I just shut the door, because what's the point? I don't need to get in a fight, especially in a job like that. I'm still the aggressor. So, where you have those opportunities to use other tools, words, a locked door, medication, that kind of stuff.
Yeah. And for folks who are not, intentionally in a security job, or for kids who are in school, that same confidence helps keep them from flaring up if they're approached. I think, the human tendency, I think, is to match the timbre of the conversation, the timbre of the room. So if guy one starts getting big and angry and agitated, and guy two, the instinct is to get big and angry and agitated too. Mm-hmm. And then we're here. But this guy gets agitated, and this guy just kind of chills out. This guy tends to start chilling out, whether it's from an unconscious response to the change of the timbre of the conversation, or whether it's he's ready to fight, and this other guy still got his hands behind his back and he's whistling. You're like, what's going on over there? I maybe have misread this situation a little bit, and I'm going to kind of back up. Either way, it helps to be the calm person in the conversation.
Absolutely. There's a story. It did not happen to me. It happened to one of my cohorts at the hospital, but who actually worked on the behavioral health floor. But there was a patient who was told earlier in the day that they were going to be discharged after lunch. And of course, if anybody's ever been to the hospital, how discharges go. You're never discharged when you're told. And so lunch came and went. And the patient started getting agitated, and he comes up to the front window and says, and just starts going off on the person at the window, and he's being loud, aggressive, and Trisha's at the window is like, let me look into that. And he starts yelling. He says, and she even gets lower. She's like, even to a whisper, it's like, hold on.
Yeah.
And so he and then he kind of comes down and he's like, why are we whispering? So it was like that instant, like, and of course, she just she took his aggression and took it at a way lower level and then brought him straight down. Now, does that happen every single time? No, but it's one of those where, it's just like, okay, here, couldn't hurt to try, because if you are the calmer one, usually people will match your energy, and it's depends on, like, I see it as kind of who is the more dominant, and it doesn't necessarily mean the person who's the angriest is the more dominant one. Mm-hmm. So, you can totally show your dominance by being calm.
And, that's another thing that I think martial arts training teaches a lot of people. There are many other places to learn this as well. Mm-hmm. But I know that it's worked for me, and it's worked for kids that I've known, especially, that the structure of learning martial arts is goal-oriented. And you learn either expressly from some teachers or just kind of intuitively through the process to identify your goal for a situation and move towards that. Whether it's the long-term goal of a black belt or the short-term goal of scoring a point in a certain way in a sparring match, or the kind of medium-term goal of, well, what are we going to train in this week? What do I need to master by the end of 2 weeks to be able to show for my next assessment or what have you? And so in those conversations, instead of the goal, I'm going to dominate this conversation, it's, I'm going to get this guy to quiet down, or I'm going to find a way to leave this room without anybody following me,
Right.
or I'm going to win this argument with my spouse by getting everybody to settle down and come to an amicable middle ground on this thing we're disagreeing on. And that's that identification of goals as the beginning of a process it's an important life skill. And like I said, we can learn it in a lot of places, but martial arts is one of the places we can learn that, see it applied, and see ourselves succeed at doing it.
Right. Yeah. It's funny you mentioned the spouse. I saw this meme the other day, and I think it was really geared towards men. And I wish I could remember the language on it, but basically it was in a spousal argument, men tend to be the quieter ones because they don't want to continue the aggression, or when men shut down and become the quieter ones, it's because they don't want to continue the aggression or whatever. And I can't remember. I wish but I saw it, I was like, oh yeah, no, that's, I can identify with that. So
yeah. I'm not sure we can generalize all the way out there. I think a lot of domestic users have the exact opposite. A lot of people have learned that if you're willing to up the aggression long enough, the other person settles. Then the other person gives up,
right?
Because they're not willing to be more aggressive than you. But again, the kind of violence dynamics we're talking about, the conversational dynamics, the comfort in conversation that you can develop, means that you don't get into that one-upsmanship and instead find the way to communicate that gets the goal accomplished. Yeah. Another one that got me, and this is for kids. This is for kids, but it was I was noticing that when I was running my own school, I had a brick and mortar school there for 10 years in the 2000s, and for the youngest kids, your kindergarten karate, right?
Right.
One of the cool things about that for the kids at that age is that they become accustomed to how to be in a class, about where to look, who to talk to get into line in an effective and efficient manner, to watch people who are instructing, to follow instructions. And when they're young enough and they have already had that experience in your class, when they go to kindergarten, they're not learning how to be in class like the rest of their students. They get identified early as gifted or smart or a joy in class. Yeah. And then they get the more positive attention and they get identified to do the more challenging things. And it can literally follow them for the entirety of their academic career. I don't know if you read Malcolm Gladwell's Outliers.
I have not.
So it's Malcolm Gladwell. He's kind of weird and he writes a lot of odd things, but a lot of it is observation of trends. And this book was about definition of excellence. And one of the things he noticed was the birth dates of professional athletes map very closely to the cutoff age for participating in the very youngest divisions of the sport. So if your birthday is just before the cutoff date, you're a year older than the person who had to wait another year. Other way around, it's just after. You're a year older than the kid who entered that thing from just before. And when you're talking about sports that begin at 5 or 6 years old, you're much more physically mature and mentally mature, and you get identified as a natural, as a real prodigy. And then you get in the advanced leagues and you get the advanced coaching, and that's why the birth dates of professional athletes tend to be clustered around the same.
That's an interesting observation.
Because of that early and significant leg up. And I think that in a smaller way, getting involved in martial arts classes at a young age. Although I have my doubts about how useful and good teaching karate to a 4-year-old really is, in and of itself. But
Right.
that training in particular is a solid benefit of getting into it even that early.
Mm-hmm. Well, like for me, before I owned a brick and mortar, I really didn't want to deal with any kids younger than 8 or 9. Because we hear about like the old masters. They didn't start training until they were like 14 or 15. I think even Gichin Funakoshi, I think he started when he was 14 or something like that. I think even Hohan Soken started about that time. And but it was one of those where, and we could probably use the term McDojo, but a lot of martial arts schools, if you're going to survive in today's time, you have to teach kids. And so for me, it's like, okay, well, I teach a self-defense based martial art. So how how do I incorporate, how do I teach that to a kid, like a little kid, like a 4 to 6 year old, which is what my young artisans program is. It's focused on 4 to 6, and then at 7 I start with the traditional Kempo. But I found Brandon Beliso has a program called Excellent Kids, and it is I mean, there is kicking and punching, but it is all based around life skills. So one of the first life skills they work on is focus. And so it's also associated with like the belt stripe and merit badges. So like focus means to pay attention. And if you have great focus, you can do things better. And so like this life talk that, it's, it really kind of gets the kids interacting. So like, say, like focus. It's like, okay, there's different ways that we can focus. We can look with our eyes, and we can listen to it with our ears. And we can, when we think about something, we use our brain. And when we do something physical, we use our body. And then it incorporates, like, when your parents are talking to you, you look at them with your eyes. When your teachers are teaching you, you listen to them with your ears. And so it really reinforces that, but also the drills too, that are focus based. Yeah. Which I at our last training lab, you had suggested one of the things that you did was have the kids sit across from each other and stare at each other until one giggled. So I used that in my kindergarten read that I did earlier in the week. Mm-hmm. And that was super fun. So I thank you for that. That has gone down in my list of focus games. But
I'm really glad that for folks who are watching, it's exactly what he talked about. You're in a karate class or in a demo, and you have the kids sit cross-legged in front of each other, stare with eye contact, and the first one to giggle loses. And so first, it is a good drill on focus. Second is a lot of fun. And then third, just for if you have a martial arts school, from a marketing standpoint, any adult who walks by a kindergarten classroom that is dead silent, which it will be for a minute at a time, is gonna be impressed. You're going like, what is this witchcraft? Right. And it's a good drill for all 3 of those things.
So this Excellent Kids program, like, we work on focus and coordination and manners and respect. And like right now, our focus is on memory. So that's the badge that we're working on now. And so it's like, okay, it's like, by now the kids know what a forward punch is. If they're learning their left from their right, which doesn't really help because I can barely remember my left from my right, but it's one of those where it's like one of the games that we play is kind of like one of those Simon Says games where it's like blue, red, yellow, and you have to do it in sequence. And so, you're holding a mat. It's like, okay, we're going to work on punches, go left, left, right, left. And so then you have to have the kids do that. But the other thing is one thing I've added in is that they have to know their parents' telephone number and their address to get the badge. And I had a parent in class on the weekend, and he's just like, because I have a brother, sister. The little boy is in Young Artisans, and the sister is in the Youth Kempo. And both of them, one is in kindergarten, one's in second grade. I was like, do you know your parent? At least one of your parents' telephone numbers. And if I didn't expect, I knew that the kindergarten wouldn't know, but I would think at least the second grader would know. Because I remember, and I'm sure you remember, like, I know that was a bazillion years ago, but I knew my telephone number when I was young. And the importance of it when we think of safety, and I was trying to explain it to them, it's like, what if you end up away from a crowd and you're like, okay, well, I know 911. Okay, so I can call 911 and a police officer shows up, and the police officer says, oh, okay, well, is there a way I can contact your family? Do you know where you live? And right now the answer is, I don't know. I said, but if you know your address, the police officer can take you home. And you may not be able to get through to your parent or whatever, doing their phone number, or you may not remember at the time. Maybe 911 is the first number that comes into your head. But if you can tell the police officer your telephone number, then he can call your parents and say, hey, come and get your kid, or where are you? I will take them to you, that kind of stuff. So, when it comes to safety and just one of those skills, it's a great life skill to have, because
alert viewers will remember my solution for this.
Okay.
And it'll get 3 and 4 year olds knowing your phone number.
Okay.
Whichever their device is, whether it's a tablet or phone or whatever, the password is your phone number.
Ooh, I like that.
They have it memorized inside of 48 hours.
Okay, I like that. Okay, that's a great idea. Okay. But and like for me, I think I can still remember my original telephone number growing up. I think it was like 503-222-22 or 6667. 2667. And I also remember we used to get a lot of phone calls for AAA because it was one number off of AAA. But that was my home number growing up. And now
that is now part of your thing, because memorizing phone numbers isn't it's not as important a skill in modern society, because
I know
my wife's phone number is, hey Siri, call my wife.
Yeah, I mean, mobile. Oh my gosh, you just you just called my wife. That's really funny. Okay.
And the point being that with focus, with memory, with discipline, with all of those other skills, that's, people come to the karate for the kicking and the punching, but these other skills, whether they're explicitly taught, which they often are in child's class, or whether they're kind of ancillary, as they often are in the adult classes, those things still get developed. And it's, the kind of whole theme of this is what are the surprising parts? I think community is another big one too. There's been a lot of research on how important community is to mental health. It's even linked to longevity. One of the reasons that a lot of elders start to decline in their health very rapidly once moved into a retirement home is, although those are communities of their own, they're not their community. And so they're uprooted and have to do the work of starting that, where being a part of a martial arts school with a healthy culture and with people you see and train with every week and occasionally go out for a beer with or some coffee afterward, and where your kids train with their kids, so you end up at the same birthday parties together and all of that, that is an immense benefit for our mental health and for the health of our communities.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with that. I absolutely agree. And for me, I've seen it personally. My mother-in-law, she's not of advanced age. I mean, she's 70, but my stepfather is almost 80 and he's healthy. So, but she is very much secluded. She does not like being around other people. She doesn't, her community is very, very small, and she just sits in a corner and colors all day because that's what she wants to do. She's retired. She doesn't want to do anything. She was showing signs of memory loss, of dementia. And so it's like, okay, well, let's get you in. So, let's go to, MRI and CTs and all these tests, blood tests, all that kind of stuff. Everything came back perfectly clear. There should be no reason she's having these issues. So really it boiled down to, she doesn't use her brain. Mm-hmm. So it's essentially atrophying. So now the doctors have her doing other stuff and trying to be more active, and she's actually showing improvement. And so when we get into the community, being active, using our brains, hanging out with other people, having, existential conversations, which I'll mention something a little bit later with that, is truly important.
Yeah.
So,
yeah. As a bit of an aside, I'm really interested because recently, we're both nerds. This is how much of a nerd I am.
Okay.
Yeah, I play awesome. Dungeons and Dragons. Still to this day, we are starting to see Dungeons and Dragons, and then advanced board games like Settlers of Catan. The new wave of board games, which are much more engaging than Monopoly, for instance.
Right.
People who have enjoyed their games their whole life are now old enough to start moving into retirement communities and playing those games there with the other people in the building. So 10 years from now, we're going to have some really strong data on whether playing those games regularly keeps the mind active and increases longevity, increases how long people are with it.
Yeah.
And I have a strong hypothesis as to what that data is going to end up pointing towards.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because I haven't had like I have nerd friends and we have, different conversations, but I have my eldest, I told, and this is kind of where it gets into, I know I forget stuff, but we had everybody over at the house the other day, and my son and I had this very nerdy, very deep existential conversation about like either a video game and I don't know if it was a video game. It may have been related to Star Wars or Star Trek or something like that it has like no basis in reality, but it's like, okay, let's delve into these characters that are not real and really, go through it. And I wish I could remember the exact topic. He can't even remember, but I did tell him, I was like, I really enjoyed that conversation because I hadn't had like that deep, super geeky conversation in a while. And because usually it's like, recently I rewatched Picard season 2, and because we got season 3 starting next week. And in it, Picard mentions,
hold on, we are 2 episodes into season 2. If you spoil something, my wife will kill me.
Okay, then I won't mention that. But I made this observation and I sent it. I did I sent just that observation to a friend, and he was like, oh, that makes lots of sense from, a psychology or, standpoint. But that's where the conversation ended because it's just in text. But I know, like, if Rob was sitting in front of me or like, on Zoom, it would have just had this really good back and forth, thing going on. So, but yeah, that's kind of, those connections and, with, wherever, yeah, I'd be interested to really see how our generation will be different from the other generations when it comes to memory and connections. And yeah, so.
And again, that all boils back to community as one of the important factors to health and longevity, not just living a long time, but enjoying the ride.
Yeah,
And
absolutely.
and it's not a large part of the perception of the martial arts industry or even the marketing for martial arts, but I think it's a hugely important part of it. Especially, I'm not here to talk about religion in any particular way. Everybody's got their own relationship with whatever is there, and they've earned it as much as I have. But it is true that churches used to provide very strong community, and people don't go to church like they used to. And places like a martial arts school can be that community, that central community for people in much the same way. And so they're filling in a gap in society that has developed over the last 40 years.
Right. No, I would agree. And in fact, one of my friends, when he found out that I was ordained, he's like, "Oh, how about you turn your school into a church and you religiously get together every Tuesday and Thursday for." And I was like, "No, I can't do that." But
seriously, folks, my mother is a Lutheran minister, and
yeah,
she and I, especially when I was running my school, we had several conversations about how similar our jobs were. That martial arts school owner, a sensei, is the leader of a community that gathers to serve and celebrate the things that they find most important in life.
mm-hmm.
But anyhow, we're coming close to the time we have appointed for me to come join you for Kosher Corner. So before I let you go, what's the really smart question I should have asked you but didn't?
Oh, shoot. Put me on the spot. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. That's yeah, that's got me stumped. I think we've covered quite a bit, but no, when it comes to this, you got me stumped, Jason. Sorry.
No worries at all. So folks, the through line here has been, Mish and I are definitely, we've drunk the Kool-Aid on the martial arts thing. So, don't just take our words for it, but maybe we've had some conversations about some reasons to train in martial arts that maybe haven't come to your attention before. So give that some thought, talk to some other folks. Thank you everybody for watching today. Thank you again, Mish, for coming on. If anybody here is in the Vancouver area, his martial arts school is Artisan Martial Arts. It is an excellent community, an excellent school run by great people. I'm out there once a month for their training lab with Rory Miller. And yeah, so if you're in that area, definitely go take a look. And thank you again, Mish, for joining us.
Yeah, thank you, sir. And I'll see you in a little bit for mine.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, everybody, for watching.